Welcome to this week's edition of Ambitious, Awakened, and Aligned. Today, we welcome Gane. We are doing Unchained Purpose, Rising from the Ashes, from Wall Street to prison to purpose driven powerhouse. Guy is a force, I'm telling you. He entered the financial world at the age of 20, went on to become one of the foremost financial advisors in the United States. As a stockbroker and a registered investment advisor, he owned his own firm with multiple offices nationwide. Guy managed investment portfolios for thousands of clients and many millions of dollars. In 2008, though, he was accused of money laundering and mail fraud, and despite his vehement denials, as well as passing multiple polygraph tests, Guy, nearly 4 years later, was sentenced to prison for 13 years. Eventually, he served 9. It was there that Guy set an example of resilience, fortitude, and the method to overcome incredible obstacles, taking charge of the only thing left to him, his mind. Guy began his new life journey of authorship, along with defending the vulnerable and the forsaken, as well as coaching, and he supported the discouraged and the overwhelmed. He has published 3 books: Unchained and Unbroken, Chrysalis, and also Money: An Avenue to Wealth, Managed Money. All of these are available on Amazon or your favorite bookstore. Through personal guidance and intelligence and his own experience, he was released in 2020 and formed the company Gane Wisdom. As a certified performance coach, he is now able to impart a message of hope, of encouragement, of forgiveness, and of achievement through his public speaking engagements. Along with Gain Wisdom, Guy also organized Prisoncology, where he partners with the Christian community nationwide to support people, to mentor them, to help them when they're both entering and departing the prison system. This conversation is enlightening, supportive. It has so many layers, and I'm so excited to share Guy and his story with you today. Welcome, Guy Gane. So thrilled to have you here today, Guy. And our podcast today is Unchained Purpose, Rising from the Ashes, from Wall Street to prison to purpose driven powerhouse. So excited to share in your story today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a
Mm.
true honor. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're coming to us from Buffalo, but you live in Detroit. So, Guy and I were talking before we started the podcast. These are our opportunities to show that Canadians and Americans truly are still in alignment,
Sure.
having beautiful conversations together and rippling out everything that we can do together. So, thank you for being here and allowing us to show that.
Again, thank you for allowing me to be here. It's an honor.
So good. Well, let's dive in. So, your journey has been nothing short of extraordinary, from financial success to unimaginable hardship, and now what I would call a rebirth. So, what was the moment when you were in prison when you knew you were being called to something more?
That's a really good question. And a couple of days after I went to prison, I went reported to prison in October of 2011. And a few days after I had gone, I had to go down to the medical office for my physical. And I had had all of my medical records sent to the prison. And again, you can imagine this was something that was just so traumatic. I never, ever would think that something like that would happen to me. And I fought with the government for a long time that I was innocent. And anyway, that's a whole nother story that I'm happy to share, but maybe not at this moment. But in any event, um, after the government came into my offices, Lori, um, I was a pretty heavy guy back then.
Mm,
And I had worked out most of my adult life, but had stopped because I had gotten so busy.
mm,
My company, which I owned, had expanded to, we were just opening up our 5th office actually in Boston, Massachusetts, but I had 4 offices on the East Coast. But what had happened is a couple of months after the government came in, I had a heart attack
mm,
and I actually died. And they brought me back with the paddles. And I remember Even though I was being kind of chased by the government, or at least being looked at, I thought, well, it can't get any worse. I mean, how much worse can it get? You die, and I didn't realize that I had fallen off another cliff and was about to fall off another one. Anyway, when I reported to prison and I went to medical, the doctor that had seen me said to me, he said, Mr. Gane, he said, I had a chance to look at your medical records. He said, I was a cardiologist on the outside. He said, I'm retired now. He's an older gentleman.
Mm.
He said, and I do some contract work for the government. And he said, I see that you'd had a heart attack. And I said, yeah. And he said, and they brought you back with the defibrillators. I said, yeah. He said, Mr. Gane, they work less than 2% of the time. I said, you're kidding. I really didn't know that. And he said, most people think that they work all the time, but they don't.
Mm.
And he said something to me, Lori, that really shook me. He said, God has a special plan for you. And I looked down, I remember giving him a smart answer. I said, yeah, I got 13 years. He said, no, no. He said, this was a purpose. He said, God has got a special plan for you. And I know that might sound a little bit hokey, but it's the truth, because when he said that, even though I was looking at, this huge journey that I was about to undertake, I always felt that there was going to be the day that I was going to finally leave. And if we go back to 2011, and I was told at that point that I would get out in 2023, that would be like being told today you're in prison today. You just reported, and you're going to be there until 2038. It's like, oh my good. I mean, real? No. I mean, how do you wrap your head around that?
Yeah.
I ended up getting out early, which was kind of ironic. Instead of, doing all that time, I was quote unquote only in for 9 years. But, the thing is that I always told people it would have been much easier to do that time had I actually been guilty. As you know, that I passed two polygraph tests.
Yeah, I was just going
And
to ask, like, how did you go through that reconciliation of that your soul knowing that you were innocent and a system
yeah.
choosing something different? Like, how did you reconcile that so that you could, you vibrate out such joy today? How
Mhm.
did you reconcile that?
It's a process. I think all of us that face hardship, and I don't care what your hardship is,
Yeah.
whoever it is, and wherever we are, we process it. We take a step at a time, and we want it to be over. Human beings are motivated by two things. They're motivated by pain and pleasure.
Mhm.
And most people will do most anything for a pleasurable experience, but every human being will do whatever they can to avoid pain.
Absolutely.
And it's just is the way it is. And it's not only humans, it's the animal kingdom. It's even, been proven in the insect world. But the thing is that to answer your question directly, I had a lot of faith that things would work out, and it was difficult. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, it was all right." I did fine, and it was horrible. And unlike I think the urban legend that guys that go to prison, and gals probably too, that everybody's innocent and it was their lawyer that messed them up and so on. Most of the people, I mean, actually all of the people that I met never blamed anybody but themselves. And I did too. I mean, I was a very, very trusting person. And my trust really was unbounded. What I did is and this was very difficult for me to admit to myself, Lori, I was an approval addict. And I needed everybody to like me. I needed everybody to love me. I needed everybody to think well of me. And I made decisions based on that. And I hired people that little still small voice that all of us have. I had told me, don't hire this one, don't hire that one. And it's ironic because the people that I had gotten that from were the people that really let me down.
Mm.
Three of my brokers were actually the ones that had been lying to the clients. And when they got caught, they blame me that I told them to do that. And I don't hold anything against anyone. And I'm not just saying that. I have forgiven everybody. I forgave them at the time. I realized that when you're faced with, I'm sure the prosecutors told them 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in prison. The drowning men are going to drown the person that's trying to save them.
Mhm.
So I understand. And the first night that I went to prison, I was crying. I mean, of course, I'm trying to, be a man and not let anybody see me, but I swore at God when I was laying in that bunk that night. It was 11:30. I'll never forget that. It was 11:30 at night, and the lights were kind of dim at that point, and I put my shirt over my face, and I cried. And I don't care how tough guys are. There's always a first night if you go to prison, and when you're facing time, I don't care if it's 6 months or 6 years or 30 years, whatever the case is. It's traumatic.
Mhm.
And I swear to God, I said, "How could you let me go to prison?" I blamed him at the time. "How could you let me go to prison? You know the truth of anybody in this world. You know the truth. Not only that, but I died. You had me and you sent me back
Mhm.
to this." I went there. I'm surprised I didn't get struck down that point because I was swearing at him. I was calling him all kinds of filthy names. But anyway, the thing is that my faith was really
Mhm.
what had gotten me through it.
Mhm.
And again, I very early on, people would come to me and kind of, you know, well, let me put it this way. I used to be called Saint Gino. That my prison name. Everybody called me Gino. They used to call me Saint Gino, the patron saint of lost causes, because the guys that kind of would come in and felt really bad and so on. I could understand. I really did, and to this day, I still do. But I said to these folks, you've been given a blessing, and they'd look at me like I had 20 heads, and I said, the blessing is now you know who your friends are. Now you know who really loves you. Because, I had a lot of friends, Lori. I mean, I had friends I could bump into them anywhere I went. But boy, I'll tell you, once I got in trouble and this stuff started going into the paper, those friends were few and far between.
Mhm.
And I was blessed though, because I had a good two handfuls of people that did stick by me that knew me. But I had a good friend of mine. I want to relate this to you. I had a good friend of mine who was brought up in England, and he moved to Australia when he was about 25 years old. And he was a real estate agent, real estate owner, I should say, a broker, pardon me, in Australia. But it was about 10 weeks before the government came in, and I had no idea what was going on.
Mhm.
So, I mean, when I got to my office that day, I was stunned. Um, but he told me, he said, Guy, he said, "You always say you have all of these friends." He said, "In Australia," he said, "we don't call people our friend unless we mean it." He said, "Let me tell you what I mean." He said, "A friend is someone that will get up for you at 2:15 in the morning to help you out." He said, "When in Australia, we'll introduce somebody as, 'Hey, this is John, a good acquaintance of mine,' or 'This is Jim, an acquaintance of mine.'" He said, "But if you say, 'This is Bob, a good friend of mine,' that holds a very special place for the Aussies." And, when he was telling me this, and I've told him what I'm telling you. As he was telling me this, I was like, "Oh, here we go." You know, I didn't want to hear it. I was
Right.
blown up in my mind. But you know what? It was right, because again, once everything happened, people really, that glow that successful people exude, all of a
Mhm.
sudden it's gone. And the other thing was, I think a lot of people were afraid that, they were going to get involved with me in
By
some,
association.
yeah,
Yeah.
guilty by
Yeah.
association, exactly. But the thing is that I realized that I couldn't dwell. I had to forgive people, and it isn't like when we say to somebody, "I forgive you." I think a lot of people say that thinking they're bestowing some honor on that
Mhm.
person. "I forgive you." It's not for them. It's for us, because
Absolutely.
generally people will move on that have hurt you,
Mhm.
and they don't even think about you anymore. And when you hold on to that anger, and it's normal, but, if you hold on to that anger, it eats us up inside. It doesn't do us any good. So the thing is that what I felt is that it was important for me to realize what everybody was going through.
Mhm.
And especially, I always felt that how would you feel knowing that your lies put someone in prison?
Mhm.
I really think that they're the ones that are still in prison, not me.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Yes,
uh,
because we can define prison in so many ways, right? We can create that
right,
for ourselves as well.
right, right.
I'm really, it's such a unique story from the perspective of who you were when you went in and the belief systems around even the friends and
Mhm.
how you were people pleasing and all those things. So from the lens of, God had a plan, who were you when you came out of prison that was so different from the person that went in? And how did you find a way to see that as there was a plan in it all?
Well, let me explain it this way. After the government came in and accused me, I had 10 standalone articles about me in the Buffalo paper because that's where my home office was
Right.
here in Buffalo. And I got ripped apart.
Mm,
I got I got spit at, literally spit at from people. I got pushed around.
mhm,
That confident individual that I was up until the day the government came in was gone. I was a beaten animal. I was a wounded animal.
mm,
And I allowed that to happen to me. I allowed people to push me around. I mean, I'm talking about physically pushing me around. And again, I'm not kidding when I tell you I had people spit at me.
mm,
I realized while I was in prison, I after work, I would go into the weight room. I got back into weightlifting again, lost a ton of weight, got really healthy. And, ironically, prison probably saved my life as far as my physical life, because I was able to devote my spare time into playing the piano. I'm a piano player, and I played the piano for the Catholic church, the Protestant church,
mm,
and also the Spanish guys. But the thing is that the other thing that really got me out of prison was being able to go into the weight pit. And I was in there for a couple hours a day and got really strong. And it was funny. I remember one of the guys came up to me and after a while and said, Gino, everybody, is wondering why you're doing all those heavy weights and nobody can believe that you're doing all of this. And I felt like saying, well, it's to protect me against you. But, because when you
I
go to
must
prison,
stay safe.
yeah, and that's so true because when someone goes to prison, they're either the predator or the prey. And I
Right.
was an older guy. I was in my 50s when I went to prison. And the average age in prison right now is about in federal prison is about 40
And
and
a
40.
white collar type of
Yeah, and a white collar
crime,
guy. And I
right?
went into the prison.
Not a street,
Not a street guy,
yeah.
exactly. And, the other thing is that I fit the demographics of a child pornographer. They were generally older, they were generally white guys, and, I remember that nobody ever really said anything to me like that. They were pretty bad to the guys who are involved in that crime.
Mhm.
You don't wanna go to prison for that.
No.
Uh, I won't get graphic about it, but use your imagination. But I remember saying to somebody one time, it's really amazing. Nobody's ever really said anything or looked at me like that." They said, "Gino, you walk like a money guy." I said, "Well, how does a money guy well, whatever it is, you walk like that." I said, "Well, okay." But, everybody got to know me, as time went on, and I had what they call cred, which is the credibility. I never lied to
Mm,
people. I was always upfront with everybody. But what I did, Lori, is I really manned up, and you have to. And, knowing that I was not gonna take garbage from anybody anymore, that was pretty obvious. I stuck up for myself, and this is something I would mentor people coming into prison. I told them, I said, even if it means that you're gonna get the snot kicked out of you, you've got to defend yourself.
mm,
Because if you don't, you are going to be picked on for the rest of the time that you're there. I mean, it really is a jungle. It really, really is.
mm,
So the thing is that that changed me. The fact that I had to come to the realization that, hey, I was an approval addict. I let people walk all over me, and I'm not like that anymore at all. I
mm,
keep thinking, although preposterous, I wish I could go back to back in those days. I would never be in prison. But that is,
mm.
the chicken or the egg type of argument.
Absolutely.
But, when I came home, I realized I was a different person. I
Mm,
was not someone that was ever gonna be walked on again. I certainly was never gonna let anybody push me around or, spit at me, not after 9 years of federal prison.
mhm,
Fortunately, that has not happened. Nobody has ever said anything, but I look much, much different than I did
mm,
before also. But anyway, what was amazing, I think all of us at one time or another have said, "Gee, I wonder what somebody would be like if they came back that lived 100 years ago or 200 years ago." Well, let me tell you, after 9 years, I was a babe in the woods. Instagram had just started to come out before I went in. Facebook had been around for a few years, but nowhere as popular. There were just so many things that were so different,
mhm,
and the cell phones when before I went in, it was just a flip phone.
Yeah.
all of a sudden there was these things called iPhones. And,
Yeah.
um, I think that I always felt bad for the guys that had been in 20 and 30 years. As a matter of fact, I, gave a talk last week in Pennsylvania, and one of the, venues that I had was to, formerly incarcerated people who had just gotten out.
Mm.
And, these guys were telling me they've been in 30, 35 years. And it's like, I felt insignificant. I mean, 9 years is horrible, but,
Well, at that point, you would feel safer staying in
yeah,
because
you
that
really you get institutionalized,
it's a life that you understand at that point,
right?
where this life out here would feel just
Very
real
foreign.
unknown. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was scared when I came out too. I came out in the middle of COVID. I've been home now for 5 years. But, I was scared. I remember I had to go get my, state ID, and, of course, remember back then everybody was standing 6 feet apart and
Mm.
had masks and so on. But in Michigan, it was a little bit different than what I was used to in New York. In Michigan, they have a very, very large office, and on one section is the Department of Motor Vehicles, on another section is the Secretary of State, and another one is Medicaid. So all of this big room and all of these little windows there that you can go to. I had a panic attack. I had never had one before. And I didn't wanna be around all of these people, even though I had been surrounded by thousands of people, and all that time, but it was just scary to be back out again. And the nightmares, Lori, that I had for about 2 years after I
Mhm.
came home, um, I don't wanna get emotional about it, but it was every night.
Mm.
Every night I would wake up during the middle of the night thinking I was back in prison. It was like, "Oh, thank God," but while I was in prison, I would wake up and I would have dreams of home, and I would wake up and, I'd see the steel bunk above me, and I think, "Oh, man, I can't believe I'm actually here."
Yeah.
So I think psychologically it does a number on you, and I can't tell you that it has gone away because it hasn't. I certainly don't have those nightmares like that anymore, but
Mm.
it's like, when we're kids and we put sand in the pail and put the water on top, if we mix that up, it comes to the surface, and that does happen, and, maybe even tonight I'll end up dreaming again about it.
Yeah. How did you how did you go from that, and even today, I'm sure, like, the emotion of it is still there.
Mhm.
How do you take that and step that into, like, digging deep into the potential that comes from what you've experienced and this deep sense of you have a new purpose?
Yeah, when I tell people I've been there and done that, I've really been there and done that.
Yeah.
As a stockbroker for 34 years and a registered investment advisor, I made a tremendous amount of money.
Mhm.
I was very, very blessed. There really was. I never took that for granted. But the way I didn't take it for granted then is not how I can equate that now. I had to start over. And but I was again fortunate because I already had a business background behind me. I knew
Mhm.
how to start a business. But I along with my speaking, I also do life coaching, and I'm also a business consultant.
Mhm.
And when I talk to businesses, I tell them, it's one thing to know how to start a business. It's another thing to know what not to do in a business. And Lori, I know what not to do in a business.
Right.
I know all of those things that got me into the trouble that I got. I've been able to pass on to the businesses that I've helped, and it really has been I don't say this arrogantly, but I think it's been a blessing because some of them were going to get involved in some situations
Mhm.
that they really didn't know, because that's the problem, is you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know sometimes the questions to ask. Well, I'm the guy now that you can ask because, again, I went from being very, very successful to the point where the government took all of my money. I mean, they took everything. When I came out of prison, I came out with nothing except the clothes on my back. That was it. And I
Is
had to
there any reconciliation with that now that things have shifted, or that's just a
what do
door
you
you
mean?
close and you start over again? Is
Yeah,
there a
you
way
just have to start over again.
to start over again?
I had written a few books in prison, and those are published. I wrote another book when I came home on money management.
Yes.
So, the thing is again, I put things together that would give me that strong basis. And, I've told people that life is a lot like working out. You have to have discipline when you work out. You have to have consistency when you work out. I mean,
Mhm.
people, especially right after the holidays, "Oh, I'm gonna lose 20 pounds and I'm gonna go to the gym every day." And, they say by February 4th, I think that most people have, given up on working out. But the thing is that life is like that. It's a struggle. It's hard to do. It's not easy. I mean, I go to the gym 3 days a week, but I get there really early, like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. But, the thing is that I don't want to give that up
Mhm.
because it's not so much that I'm trying to buff myself up. I'm pretty strong now, but the thing is that it's that discipline. It's
Yes.
knowing that I have to do this. And if I can be disciplined with that, I know I can be disciplined in all of the things that I need
Mm.
to do. So
Okay.
I started a few businesses when I came home.
Mhm.
One of the organizations I started was a prison mentorship for
Yes, I was just going to ask you to tell us more about that.
yeah, okay. Um, when I went in, I didn't have a clue. The only thing I knew was what I had seen on TV and had heard about, and all of those things that you see on TV and you hear about are true.
Mm.
Again, when people come at you, there's sometimes they're coming at you for a reason, and you can guess what the reasons are. Which again is why I said to people, you have to defend yourself. But the thing is that I realized how difficult that was when I walked in that day, that first night, I was like, "Oh my god." I mean, people screaming and hollering, and yeah, I got brought onto the block, and I thought, How am I gonna possibly do this?" So what I did is about 6 months before I left, I thought, I had dealt with a prison consultant before I went to prison.
Mm.
I had been referred to him, and, I talked to him. And, he told me what he could do for me, and you'd probably get me probation and home confinement, and, he had all of these wonderful things to say. Now, remember, I mentioned a minute ago that the government took all of my money, so I'm completely broke. My wife and I had to go to well, I shouldn't say she went to food pantries. We had nothing. And it was my second marriage. She had smaller children, and mine were all grown at the time and had actually worked with me. But the thing is that I didn't want people to have to go through blindly what I had gone through.
Mhm.
So I decided to put together, like a kind of an ebook. I didn't know what an ebook was at the time, but I put this outline together, and it was very difficult to do because even though I had written books in prison, they weren't about prison. I mean, a little bit, but it was nothing about what I had to dredge up. And all of the things that I had to remember about coming into prison and how to
Mm.
be in prison and behave in prison and just survive in prison, I had to put down on paper.
Mhm.
Anyway, what I did is I wrote an ebook. It's 110 pages long
Mm.
of if somebody goes to prison, what to expect, how to behave, what things that nobody ever tells you to do, and
Mm.
how to behave. All of those things are in there. And then what I did is I actually put, when I came home, a PowerPoint presentation together. But so for people that were going into prison,
Mhm.
they would, I'd be able to mentor them, with that.
Mm.
Well, what happened is kind of took a life of its own when I got home. Um, when I put everything together, I ended up putting together a board of advisors, and my board is all over the United States.
Mm.
Some of them are past felons. Some of them are corrections officers that are retired. One of them is a warden from the state of Texas who retired a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
So I have men and women on there. There's about 15 people, and we meet by Zoom. We meet every other week, and right now we're working on a program to get more information to inmates while they're in prison. But we also talk to people that are going into prison, and we don't charge them. That guy that got me for $5,000,
Ooh,
and we didn't have the money, and I was
right.
desperate. And my family, my extended family, were putting all kinds of money together,
Mhm.
and when we gave him the money, this $5,000, he didn't call me right away. So a couple weeks later, I called him up. Hey, when are we going to get going? What's going on? Well, he said, what I want to do is we're going to put together a letter campaign, excuse me, and we're going to send these letters to the judge. What I'd like you to do is to have all the people that are supportive of you to write a letter, and I'm going to coordinate. I said, well, I've already done that. The judge actually already has that.
Mhm.
What else are we going to do? Well, Mr. Gane, you're dealing with the federal government, and they're pretty tough to deal with, and that's pretty much all I think we can do. I said, wait a minute. What about all the stuff that you told me for the past month. Well, it's the government and I really can't. My wife was livid and she called him up and said, we want our money back.
Yeah.
And he said, there's no refunds.
Oh,
And the thing, the guy stole the money. He stole it,
yeah.
I'm sorry, he did.
Yeah.
But these prison consultants that people can look up online, I
Mhm.
see some of them charge $75,000. I mean, I don't know who would pay, but I know when you're desperate. I
Yeah.
know when you're desperate, you think that somebody's gonna help you. We
Mhm.
don't charge. We do not charge. We do
Beautiful.
it for free because if there are people like me, I know that it's very difficult for them to come up with money.
Mhm.
So the thing is that I've talked to families, I've talked to wives who are beside themselves. They've talked
Mhm.
to a prison consultant. This just happened a few weeks ago, and she was crying, and she said, "This guy wants all this money, and I don't have." And I went through everything with her, and I told her, I said, "Everything that he's telling you he can do, you can do on your own. You don't
Mm,
need to pay him. I mean, I can help you with it, but
mhm.
you really can do what you need to do." So I really have a feeling of gratefulness that I'm able to, pass that peace of mind, even though it's a little bit, not only to the person going in or coming out, but to their families as well.
What a beautiful support at such a traumatizing time, and that you've experienced it so you can
Yeah,
empathize and be compassionate about
right,
everything the families are going through.
right.
So what is your work through Gain Wisdom then? Tell us a little more about that business.
Yeah. As I say, I do public speaking, and that is really my number one thing that I do. And I coach people. But the people that I work with, I don't work with a lot of folks. And the reason I don't is I want to concentrate on the people that I do work with. I only work with 12 people a year,
Mhm.
and I devote a lot of time to them.
Beautiful.
I have them, send me emails at the end of the week. We meet once a month, unless they need to meet more, but I really want to focus on what they're doing because I want them to be successful. And so, again, it's only 12 people a year. I do business consulting. Gain Wisdom is part of that, as well as we mentioned before.
Mhm.
Also, I decided a couple of years ago, people kept asking me back in 2022, actually, right when I came home, what do you think about the stock market? What should I do? And
Mhm.
I thought, well, gee, I've kind of been away from it, but it was in my blood. And I started to publish a newsletter, a weekly newsletter about the stock market. I'm pretty proud of it. And again, I say this humbly because even though I can't be in the business anymore,
Mhm.
it can't take away the knowledge that I have.
Mm,
And I've been able to pass that on. I really focused that newsletter, Lori, to people that really didn't have an awful lot of money.
mm.
When I was a registered investment advisor, I was actually personally managing people's money, but I charged them a 2% a year fee, and it
Mhm.
would go down depending on the dollar amount. But the thing is, I always told them, even though I can't guarantee you a profit, I can guarantee if you don't make a profit, I won't charge you.
Right.
I'll continue to pay or continue to manage your account until we make you money. So
Mm.
everybody, I had skin in the game.
Mhm.
So the thing is that I published this weekly newsletter, and actually, what I did is back in February, based on all of the analysis and things that I do every week, I advised the people that follow me to put their money into a money market account.
Mm,
That was on February the 24th. The market had actually reached it here in the U.S. As high on February the 19th.
mm.
So 3 trading days later, I had advised everybody to put their money into cash into the money market accounts, and that is still the advice that I've given them. So
Mhm.
all of the foolishness that has gone on since that time, and I know we could talk
Oh, yes, we
a
could.
couple hours, but all of the foolishness, and I'll leave it at that, that's
Yeah.
gone on since then, the people that follow me have their money in safe.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I should have been following your newsletter at the time.
Yeah.
I feel like, one of the things that's kinda coming to my mind is people listening that feel like they've made a mistake or something's happened to them that they can't recover from, or their dream just feels like it's fizzled away somehow. Like what would you say to them how they can come back from that?
That is a question that a lot of the professional guys in prison would ask me, and they they really only didn't ask. Some did, but most of them were, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was a doctor. I can't do that anymore. I was a lawyer. I was an accountant. And I told them they can't take away your knowledge and you cannot give up. Don't give up. We all have challenges. Some are much, much bigger than others,
Mm.
but we all have challenges. So sometimes it's health, sometimes it's financial, but the thing is, you can't give up. I always tell people have a plan B. You
Mm.
know, when people want something really desperately, if they're faith-filled people, they pray. But normally when most people pray, "Oh, please, dear God, please don't let this happen. Please let me get this money for my mortgage. Please don't let them take my car. Please let me get the money so I can send my kid to school." We're begging. That's not the way to pray. Praying should not be, it is not, it's not, shouldn't be, it shouldn't be begging. It's not begging. Praying is something that you believe that it's going to come to you.
Mm.
You may want to ask for God's guidance, and that my book, Chrysalis, not to throw a plug there, but goes into that very, very deeply. But the thing is that I tell people don't give up, and again, have that plan B, because even though you may want that beautiful home that you've been looking at, for instance, maybe you're not going to get that. But, if I don't get that one, there might be another one. There is another one over here. Have something else because when we put our emotions into what we really, really want, what do we normally do? We normally think when we're begging about, oh, I really want this, I really want, we don't think we're going to get it.
Mhm.
So we're projecting that out there
Mm.
that we're not going to get this anyway. That's why I'm begging. Otherwise, hey, if I was confident, let me put it this way, Lori. If you went to the restaurant and you ordered a steak and you ordered a baked potato, I mean, you have every confidence knowing it's going to come out.
Mhm.
You're not begging the waiter or waitress, hey, please bring it. I really am hot. You don't do that. And you don't do it because you already know what's going to happen.
Mm.
And I know it's easier said than done. It takes practice to do. But again, you know, I've been there. Nobody begged harder. I'm sure they begged maybe as much, but nobody begged harder not to go to prison than I did. But that's all I could think about when I was praying, "Oh, please, I don't want, oh my God, please don't let this happen." Even though I kept saying they're gonna find out, they're gonna know the truth didn't matter. It really didn't.
Mhm.
I believed in that old adage that we have here in the US, truth, justice, and the American way.
Mhm.
And, our country, I can get off into a whole tangent about how the mass incarceration in the United States, that we have 5% of the world population and 25% of the population in prison, which is ridiculous worldwide. But the thing is that, every time I prayed about that, it was always like, oh, God, I don't want to go. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be, as I was saying all that, it's all I could do was picture myself being in prison. So,
Mm.
the thing is that when you beg, when you think you're not going to get it, what we do if we don't have a plan B, we put all of our hope onto this one particular goal that we want. But if we don't have a backup plan, then the problem is that you think, well, I'm not going to get it. I'm cooked. But you don't think about the positive. You think about what happens when I don't have it, and that's where our attention goes.
Oh, it's so true. And as you were speaking there, I was thinking of this word freedom that can mean so many things, so many different things. Even I think so many people don't have freedom just from their thoughts and
Right?
experiences. So, what does freedom mean to you now? Because I'm sure you had to sort of go through
Yeah.
stages of that being something different. What does it mean now?
You know, this is going to sound corny.
Mm.
When I put the freedom and gratitude are kind of intertwined in my mind,
Mm.
because when I go to bed at night, I have a mattress, not a steel rack that I lay on. And I have warm blankets on me, and I'm not freezing in the wintertime because I got 2 thin blankets that they gave me. I have a pillow to put my head on when I didn't have a pillow there. You know, freedom to me is the freedom of fear. It's the freedom of being afraid of something that I'm not going to, or that
Mm.
I'm gonna have taken away. I told somebody the other day, and this is really weird. I still look at my emails when I open it up in the morning, and I still get that feeling that I got back way back when, that there was something bad in the email. That lawyer was gonna send me something that I didn't wanna read, or I didn't wanna know
Mm.
about, or I didn't wanna hear, or I was gonna find out that there was another article about me in the paper that ripped me apart. Um, when I hear a knock at the door, you
Mm.
know, I still get that feeling, and I but there's a freedom that comes to me immediately, like, Oh, that's great. I don't have to worry. And even in prison, I was never involved in any shenanigans.
Mhm.
So the freedom I was there. I mean, I hated it being there.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I was there, but I hated being there.
Mm.
But the thing is that I knew when they did shakedowns, um, I didn't hide anything. I didn't have any contraband, so I was never worried. Problem I had is the notes that I was putting together for my books, they would routinely take away, and I had to start all over again. But,
Mm.
the freedom that I feel is really the freedom knowing that I can do anything. I
Mhm.
know there's a passage in the Bible, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. And I don't mean to get all religious with people here, but the thing is that you asked earlier, what are some of the things that got me through prison?
Mhm.
And knowing that, one of the things in my book, Chrysalis, I use scripture to prove how Jesus himself taught us how we can reach the goals that we want. He talked about not doubting. He talked about faith. He talked about believing. And over and over and over in the Bible, it talks about that. But the thing is that, when I was putting everything together and going through Bible passages, I would hear, it was really funny. I would hear the most filthy the most filthy language in prison you could. And
I
here
can
I'm
only
writing Bible,
imagine.
yeah, and I'm writing these Bible verses and hearing things you can't even imagine.
Uh-huh. Just coming into, like, how do those things coexist, right?
Yeah,
It's
really,
back to
right,
the polarity of everything. It's
right,
so interesting.
right.
What's one truth that you still hold on to from what you learned about yourself in prison?
I realized while I was there, when I came home, for the first couple of months, I was lost, as I said,
Mhm.
and I was living with my son. Unfortunately, my wife and I broke up while I was in prison, but I went to live with my son and his family, and I was blessed to be able to get to meet my granddaughters and
Mm.
stay with them at their home. And how many grandparents today can do that? And I lived with them for almost 3 years. And all of my grandchildren, I have three of them now, but all of them were born while I was in prison.
Mm.
But, the thing is that, for those first few months, it was very difficult for me to reacclimate, as I mentioned earlier. But after about a year, I thought, "Why am I feeling so confident?"
Mm.
I mean, I really thought about that, because it was almost like it filtered down on me, this feeling, and I really was puzzled, and I prayed about it, and I thought about it, and "Why am I feeling this way?" And one day it finally dawned on me, I went through hell, and I came home. And I think every guy in prison and gal in prison that comes out or in the service, I mean, I can't even compare myself
Mm.
to someone who's seen combat, but
Mm.
they've got to feel that way, I think, because they made it through. Yeah, there's a guilty feeling, especially if you're in the service, that friends of yours may have gotten hurt or killed. And why did I survive? And I knew people in prison that died there or died as soon as they came home. But it was that feeling of confidence. And I knew then, if I could survive that, I could go through anything.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing was is to lose my wife, because that happened about 18 months after I had gone to prison.
Mm.
And, this girl, I hold nothing against her.
Mm.
She was supportive of me the whole time and went through hell. And she had a nervous breakdown, actually, and had to move on. But that was the most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my life. That was.
Mhm.
I realized that to go through that and to go through the prison experience made me strong. And I realized if I could get through that, I could get through anything. And I still have that feeling.
I'm in awe of you that you have made the choice to speak out, to share your words, to share your wisdom, to share your story because you didn't have to choose that. You could have chose silence. You could have chose to not be seen. That would be, almost an easier route, I'm sure. So, what inside of you, what's the legacy that through sharing your story and speaking and, consulting others on the things that you could keep them from having the hurts you've had. What's the legacy that you are really hoping or believe that you're here to
People in my company had invested money, and we had started a new company. That's how this whole thing kind of unfolded.
Mm.
But people lost money there. And one of the things that was really that people never knew, and I'm answering your question. One of the big things that people, the investors, never knew is the day that the government came in was the day everybody was going to get their money back. I had worked over a year in permanent funding, so everybody would have gotten their money that day. So I do think there was a little chicanery there on the government's part. Again, that's another story I'm happy to share. I not today, but in the future. But
2.0, Guy.
I'm
2.0.
sorry. Yeah,
2.0.
yeah, exactly. But but the thing is that I think that when people really look at themselves and they say, "What am I going to do? I've got all of this hardship. How do I get over that?" Don't give up on yourself. And for me, I knew knowing that I was innocent of what I was charged with has given me that kind of freedom that we talked about a minute ago,
Mhm,
because I know what the
mhm,
truth is. And the other thing is that I realized that by helping other people, it was helping me.
mhm,
I was always a person that was very giving. And I don't say that egotistically. I don't. I don't mean that that way.
mhm,
But I always felt that I was blessed in my life as a broker. And I had a career that so many people would have liked to have. And, I got to go to so many different places all over the world and met so many wonderful people.
mhm.
When I started in the business, I was 20 years old.
Wow.
So, at that point, the stock market, the Dow Jones was at 577 that day I entered the business. Today it's at 41,000. But the thing is that, I had gotten to meet people that were World War II veterans, my dad, of course, and
Mhm,
people in my family. But I got to meet World War II veterans. I got to meet German soldiers who had come to the United States and got their stories. I had Holocaust survivors that were clients of mine. I have had a beautiful and blessed life. I really, and I'm not just saying that, I have, because I've gotten to live 5 lifetimes in one life. And how many people can really say that?
mhm,
And I want to be able to share that passion for life,
mhm,
because I don't care what your problem is. You can overcome it. You can overcome it. I know you can. Because if an idiot like me, and I say this to people, if an idiot like me can overcome it, you can too. But before we leave, and I know we have to end right now, but when I talk to people, I say at the beginning that I can guarantee to make you happy. I can absolutely, I don't mean, a day with me, but I'm saying if you want to be happy, I can absolutely guarantee you the way to be happy. Absolutely guarantee it. You know how that is?
No. Share.
Do something nice for someone else. I promise you, whether it's buying somebody a cup of coffee that you don't know,
Mhm,
or you hold the door open for someone,
mhm,
or you buy the McDonald's lunch for the order, excuse me, for the person that's behind you in the line.
mhm, mhm,
When you do, or pay a toll, or whatever the case is, when you help someone else, there is a feeling of happiness that you have that can't be beat. And I promise you, you will be happy.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. This has been I can't believe I'm looking at the clock right now and going, "Oh my gosh, where did that time go?" This was such a fruitful conversation,
I
so
appreciate it. Thank you.
meaningful. Thank you so much that you're sharing your story. It's
Thank you
so
for letting me on.
impactful. Yeah, and that reminder of happiness does come when we can help others and make them feel, which is what you're doing with your story. So
That's
we're
it.
so happy to have you here today, Guy.
Thank
Thank you
you. Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Can't wait for the 2.0. We have
Sounds
so many
good.
more places to go.
How about we go?
I just am in such awe after this conversation with Guy about the truth that we can go through so many things in our life, unexpected things, things that take us to our knees, things that we don't understand why they're happening in the moment that they are. And yet, through resiliency, through stepping into the uncomfortable, we really do, on those edges, learn more about who we are, what we're here for, what the purpose of this life at this time might be. And when we can look at things through that lens, instead of the victim type of mentality, so many incredible things are possible. So reflect on the stories from Guy and the situations that you've been through in your own life and your own experiences, and really asking who you are on the other side of what you went through and how much you've grown and this new evolution of you and what is possible from that place. Just a deep level of gratitude for Guy sharing his story and showing us what that can be truly about. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode of Ambitious, Awakened, and Aligned.